JISOO and Zayn, eyes closed. Let's talk about it. How y'all doing? Welcome to Let's Talk About It, Music Reviews Season 11. How y'all doing? Welcome to the show. Guys, we got a good episode for you today. We got JISOO from Blackpink, and we also got Zayn from One Direction coming together to make a song together. I mean, hey, look, this is a pretty big collab, I guess you could say. Now, I remember we talked about JISOO. We talked about her whole album, actually. She dropped a whole little mini album. I remember we talked about that solo project. All the Blackpink members were dropping albums, etc., etc. This is probably one of the first, probably big solo songs that we've seen from JISOO. So, you know, guys, we've covered a lot of K-pop on this show, a lot of pop music on this show. Only makes sense to combine it together. Now, this is actually one of the first JISOO full English songs. You know, this isn't, when we do the English, and then you got the Korean, you got the, the mix that the K-pop songs always have in their music. We don't have this time. This is a full English track. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Starting off with this instrumental. Now, I would say this instrumental, is okay at best. I like the piano in the beginning. But I will say the piano is kind of basic. It's just that simple little piano loop. And then some guitar finally comes in as the song really kicks in. But honestly, I really wish, songs that are like this, these kind of pop songs, would have a little bit more to the instrumental. And we finally do get a little bit more as you're listening to the song. As we get an instrumental switch up, we get that beat finally coming in. I do like the 808s here. I like the bass. It sounds really funky, sounds really nice. And then I like those drums that kind of crash in when you're listening to the track. Overall, pretty good in my opinion. When this beat finally gets going, it actually does sound pretty good. I do like how the instrumental actually gets to open up as the song keeps going on, as the final hook comes on. You hear more of that guitar, hear more of those strings that kind of pour in the song. So you get all those elements in there, which are pretty enjoyable. But I will say, for the most part, for how this instrumental starts out and how it goes, it kind of stays the same. There's not much of a switch up here. It finally kicks in when JISOO does her second verse. But the first verse, and even Zayn's verse in the beginning, is, the instrumental kind of stays the same. So instrumental is not nothing to really, look at here. Nothing crazy, nothing groundbreaking in my opinion. But let's get into the first verse from JISOO. I do like the vocals here. Pretty good singing. I was wondering how this was going to sound, having this kind of, dark piano production, and then kind of opening it up with, more dark 808s, more dark drums that kind of go in. I think JISOO sing pretty well on here. I like the vocals. They sound pretty good. And I do like how, as the hook comes on, you have Zayn and JISOO kind of combining their vocals together and kind of, going back and forth. And, when features have this kind of back and forth thing, it makes the song a lot more enjoyable because you actually, have the feature actually doing something a little bit more on here. It doesn't feel, like a 20-second feature. You actually got, JISOO and Zayn multiple times on this song, kind of sharing the hook as the song goes on. That just makes the song a lot more enjoyable, makes the feature really stand out a lot better. And, it makes the song feel actually like a collaboration. A lot of collabs these days, when you're listening to songs, they're kind of just the simple, 20-second verse here, 10-second verse here, and then they kind of get on their way, and then the songs, that's just kind of it from the feature. When you actually have a feature that, is a little bit more involved in the song, it just makes the song feel a little bit more alive, feel a little bit more better. So I do like that. Zayn's vocals on here were actually pretty good. I like the singing. Sounds pretty good. Nothing to really, knock home here, Nothing that was too bad sounding or nothing like that. My only complaint, though, is that, they kind of put this, like, robotic kind of auto-tune filter over their voices. You can definitely hear when they, try to do higher notes and they try to hold out their notes a lot more. I just wish that was kind of toned down a little bit, actually, show off your voice. You don't need to, put some robotic ass effects. I know we're going for, some like dark ass gritty, type, love song here, but I mean, Come on, you don't need to put no fucking robotic effects on your voice. So that's the only thing I would say about the Zayn verse, is that it's a little bit too like that. But other than that, the vocals were pretty good, the flow was pretty good, sounds pretty good, and then I do like how the hook comes in, and we'll talk about the hook now. I'd say the hook is actually really good. It can easily get stuck in your head. The eyes closed thing, having Jisoo and Zayn kind of, going back and forth on this hook just makes it a way more enjoyable hook. So that's definitely a great thing here. So, all the elements I would say definitely do work. We even do get a bridge on here, which is nice. I feel like, the bridge has been coming back in 2025. A lot of, music I've listened in 2025, it's been a lot of shitty music. But I can say one thing. The bridge on songs is returning, and you do get a little bit of a bridge here. That instrumental gets to open up a lot more. Jisoo and Zayn vocals kind of combine better. You get that vocal run at the end, which sounds pretty good. So I think all the elements definitely do work here, guys. Honestly, I think I do have, better Jisoo songs that I would rather listen to than this one. This is kind of treading on the line of that kind of basic ass pop song territory. But I think when you combine the feature, you have that dark, gritty instrumental, you have those drums that finally come in when you're listening to the song. I think it makes it stand out a lot more better, in my opinion. So yeah, guys. Overall, when we talk about this song, guys, when we talk about Jisoo and Zayn coming together and make a song called Eyes Closed, instrumental in the beginning, that basic-ass piano, that basic-ass guitar, it's a little boring to listen to. You're kind of relying on Jisoo to really give a good vocal performance, and kind of Zayn doing the same thing here. But I think it can work to its benefit, and it's not the worst thing in the world when you actually can sing. So that's a good thing. But I do like how the beat actually does kick in. You get those drums, etc., etc. So yeah, guys, I like all the elements here. This is not a bad song at all. Not one of my favorites from Jisoo. Not one of my favorites from, Blackpink. And, honestly, we've never reviewed One Direction on this show. But you know who One Direction is. I've heard way better One Direction songs than this. But other than that, guys, this song was pretty decent. Overall, I'm going to have to give this song... I give it a 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10, guys. What y'all think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I don't know. Let me know. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcast at, make sure you follow. Turn on notifications, guys. We're dropping new content every single day. We got a lot more reviews coming out. And we also got some interesting stuff that I do got to talk about soon. So make sure y'all stay tuned. And I'll see y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.